The loudspeaker burst into life. "Alert! Alert! We're being invaded!" The community gathered in the sacred pavilion as armed guards surrounded the outside. Over the course of the next 6 days, Jim Jones watched on as his machete-wielding followers stalked the perimeter of his compound, waiting for the enemy. Except in this case, the enemy wasn't a rival gang or a militia. It was a U.S. Congressman, Leo Ryan. His scheduled visit had struck fear into the drug-addled, paranoid mind of Jones and would lead to one of the most infamous days in modern history. On this episode of the Infographic Show, we're going to look at exactly what went down during the Jonestown Massacre, hour by hour. November 17, 1978, 2 p.m. Congressman Leo Ryan had touched down in Guyana. He'd arrived in the small South American country to investigate allegations of abuse and mistreatment at the hands of a radical preacher called Jim Jones, the leader of the People's Temple cult. Jones was ordained in 1964, and in 1974, in the aftermath of abuse accusations and bad press, he moved some of his most devout followers to a massive swath of land in the jungle of Guyana. There, they established the settlement known as Jonestown. In 1977, the rest of the congregation followed. Once Jonestown was complete, Jones ruled over his congregants with an iron fist. Gone were the ideals of equality and socialism that he had once preached. After days of trying to schedule a meeting, Ryan finally boarded a plane for Jonestown, a settlement 150 miles south of Georgetown. He was joined by Mark Lane and Charles Gary, legal representatives of the People's Temple, as well as Ryan's personal assistant, Jackie Spear, Deputy Chief of the U.S. Mission, Richard Dwyer, 11 members of the media, including an NBC crew, representatives from a delegation called Concerned Relatives of People's Temple Members, and Neville Anaborn, a representative of the Guyanese government. 3:30 p.m. As the plane circled Port Kaituma Airport, Ryan looked out the window, surveying the jungle canopy. Somewhere out there was Jonestown, and who knew what else? Once they were on the tarmac, the group was met by a member of the Guyana police. He was under strict orders, he said, not to let anyone go to Jonestown without the permission of Jim Jones. The visit was already proving to be difficult. Also at the airport were several representatives from Jonestown, and Ryan sent Lane and Gary to speak with them. After some haggling, Ryan, Spear, Dwyer, and Anaborn were driven to the settlement in the back of a dump truck. The other members of the party would have to wait behind. 5 p.m. When the group arrived at Jonestown, they were met by Marceline Jones, the wife of Jim. Marceline was the perfect host, showing Ryan and the others around the commune's pavilion, the various handmade crafts, and even offering them glasses of iced tea. Despite the pleasantries and being aware of the remaining group at the airport, Ryan interrupted Marceline and asked to meet with Jones. 5:30 p.m. Jim Jones, dressed in a bright red shirt, sunglasses, and flanked by lawyers, finally sat down and spoke to Ryan. Ever the politician, Ryan complimented Jones on the remote settlement, impressed that such a village could be possible in the remoteness of the jungle. With the small talk over, Ryan informed Jones that there were journalists and family members waiting at the airport. By welcoming them to Jonestown, he would have the opportunity to silence any critics back home in the States. Charles Gary thought it would be good publicity for the movement, and Jones reluctantly agreed to allowing the remaining group to enter Jonestown. As the dump truck was dispatched, Ryan questioned if he had done the right thing. 6 p.m. As the sun set over the commune, Ryan and his group joined the members of the People's Temple as they crowded into the temple for an evening of festivities. Sat at the front table, Ryan and his party watched as Jones rambled about conspiracy theories, religion, and becoming a martyr. The uneasy journalists wondered if he was drugged or ill. Spirits were high in the pavilion. Ryan and the rest of his party were served dinner. The commune's resident band, the Jonestown Express, played a selection of songs, including God Bless America. People sang, danced, and had a good time. Some of the visitors enjoyed it, but Ryan and many of the reporters were unnerved by the performance. It was difficult to describe. It wasn't as if the performers were performing at gunpoint or the audience was being forced to clap along, but something felt wrong. At one point during the show, Marceline introduced Congressman Ryan to the group gathered in the pavilion and asked him to address the crowd. He told them that he had come to investigate the conditions at Jonestown, and that it had seemed to be the best thing that had ever happened to at least some of the people there. His comments were met with a standing ovation. It would later be revealed that Jones had rehearsed this performance and told his followers exactly what to say. 10 p.m. The show ended and the reporters interviewed Jim Jones while Ryan met with various Jonestown residents. Jim did not take the reporters' questions well and responded with defensiveness and hostility when they broached the subjects of drugs, guns, and physical abuse. The reporters asked to spend the night in Jonestown, but Jim refused. Only Ryan, Spear, Dwyer, Anaborn, Lane, and Gary would be allowed to stay the night. As NBC reporter Don Harris made his way out of Jonestown, a resident named Vernon Gosney handed him a note mistaking Harris for Leo Ryan. It read, "Please help me get out of Jonestown," and it bore 2 signatures. In spite of the friendly veneer that lay over Jonestown, something was wrong. 11 p.m. Effectively banished from the settlement, the reporters ended up in Port Kaituma with nowhere to stay. They found shelter at the Weekend Bar, a small rum shop where they slept on the floor. While there, they spoke to several Guyanese locals who painted quite a different picture of Jonestown from the one that Jim Jones tried to portray. The compound, they said, refused to allow Guyanese officials inside. There were beatings for the residents who refused to do as they were told, and there was even something they described as a torture hole, a pit at the edge of the jungle where misbehaving children would be dropped in the middle of the night. They would stay there screaming in terror and afraid of the monsters they were told lived in the darkness until their punishment was through. The followers lived lives of constant fear, forced labor, and loyalty tests where they would be told to drink poison only to find out later there was no poison at all. These stories, combined with the note handed to Don Harris, were more than enough to make the journalist suspect that Jim Jones was lying through his teeth about the goings-on at his compound. November 18th, 8 a.m. Jones' facade of a happy, thriving community was in full flow. The People's Temple had been given the day off. Children played basketball and watched American cartoons. The adults made the most of their free time and relaxed. Ryan and Spear continued their investigation and interviewed various members of the settlements. 11 a.m. The reporters and the family members arrived back at Jonestown later than they had planned thanks to a delay with the dump truck. The previously relaxed and cheerful Jim Jones soured at the return of the media representatives and their probing questions. Don Harris asked Jones about the rumors that surrounded the commune, the false imprisonment, the abuse, the torture. Jones denied these accusations, but then Harris played his ace card, the note that Vernon Gosney had handed him the previous night. A disgusted Jones replied, "People play games, my friend. They'll lie. Are you people gonna leave us? I just beg you." The reporters asked him to see one of the dormitories. Jim flat out refused at first until Charles Gary persuaded him to let them inside. Inside, they saw a setup similar to an army barracks with rows of bunk beds able to fit up to 60 people. By the time the tour of the dormitory was finished, word was beginning to spread through the group that many Jonestown residents wanted to leave. Congressman Ryan told Jim about one of the families who had expressed a desire to escape, the Bogues. Jim responded, "I feel betrayed." Though not everyone knew it yet, 11 people had already left Jonestown at that point. They were supposedly going for a picnic, only for a train to pick them up along the nearby railroad tracks. Throughout the day, the numbers had continued to grow, and amidst a combination of defectors and an intense questioning from Don Harris, Jim Jones was spiraling. Nobody knew the extent of it yet, but he was a man on the edge waiting for one final push. 1:30 p.m. There were between 14 and 20 Jonestown defectors climbing into trucks and preparing to leave the compound and join Ryan's party at the airport in Port Kaituma. This, for Jim, was the breaking point. This didn't seem like an especially high number to the journalists, who were surprised that more people hadn't opted to defect. But for the residents of Jonestown, it was utterly devastating. Jones tried to plead and beg with the defectors, offering one family the park's $5,000 and their passports on the condition that they remained at the settlement for 2 more weeks. Families were broken up. One man was confronted by his screaming wife as he climbed into a truck with the child he had taken without telling her. And it didn't help that many of the defectors had held important positions in the compound. The Parks had run the medical center. The Bogues had been there from nearly the start. Harold Cordell had been an officer in the church. These were not people anyone expected to leave Jonestown behind. A dejected Jones walked away. The charismatic and controlling front was gone. He was broken. 2:30 p.m. While the defectors and reporters sat waiting for Congressman Ryan, they suddenly heard shouting and chaos coming from the pavilion. Reporters rushed to the scene and saw Ryan, his shirt bloodied. A member of the temple, Don Sly, had grabbed Ryan and shouted that he was going to kill him before attempting to stab him with a knife. Mark Lane intervened just in time, wresting the knife from Sly's grip, all while Jim watched. Charles Gary later noted that Jim wasn't even fazed by the attempted attack. If anything, he was amused. Once Sly was subdued and Ryan's life was safe, Jim Jones asked, "Does this change everything?" Ryan responded, "It doesn't change everything, but it changes things." Ryan had been debating staying behind at Jonestown for a while longer, but now he was definitely not going to stick around another minute. He boarded the truck. 3:15 p.m. The truck loaded with Ryan, his party, and the defectors was pulling out of Jonestown. At the very last minute, a man ran up behind the truck, asking to join them. This man was Larry Layton, a Jones loyalist, which surprised the other defectors. When asked why he wanted to leave, Layton said, "It's just personal." With the defectors, Ryan, and his group gone, Jim went on the loudspeaker once more. He told the people in a calm voice to go to their cottages. Jonestown was unusually still, quiet, the calm before the storm. In this case, the storm was literal. The sky went dark, the wind whipped dust and debris into the pavilion, and the rain poured. 4:30 p.m. The group arrived at Port Kaituma Airport, where they discovered there were no planes on the tarmac. Guyanese police frisked the defectors, checking them for any weapons that they might have smuggled out of Jonestown. Meanwhile, Layton was seen talking to a security guard. As they waited, a tractor and a trailer carrying 7 of the People's Temple Red Brigade security team arrived at the airport, causing a wave of panic to spread through the group of defectors. 5 p.m. 2 planes arrived at the airport, a Guyana Airways Twin Otter, which Ryan and the others had first taken to get there, as well as a small Cessna to carry the excess passengers. The defectors, including Larry Layton, boarded the Cessna, while Ryan and his party made their way to the Twin Otter. But they never made it. All hell broke loose. The tractor's single engine roared as it crossed the tarmac. The Red Brigade were armed and opened fire from the tractor and trailer, peppering the area with blasts from shotguns, rifles, and pistols. Inside the Cessna, Larry Layton pulled out a gun and began to shoot the passengers. He made 3 shots and was able to seriously wound one defector and hit another before his gun jammed. For a moment, the men from the truck stopped firing. Inside the Twin Otter, Annaborn peered through a window and saw the Red Brigade, aiming guns at Ryan and the rest of their party. Then the shooting started again. Congressman Ryan, NBC cameraman Bob Brown, NBC newsman Don Harris, San Francisco Examiner photographer Greg Robinson, and Temple defector Patricia Parks were killed. Ryan had been shot over 20 times. As the Red Brigade departed, the Cessna's pilot, along with the crew of the Twin Otter, took off fleeing to Georgetown, leaving behind the bodies on the airstrip. While chaos was erupting on the airstrip, Charles Gary reported that Leo Ryan was planning to issue a report describing Jonestown in good terms. Despite this, Jones felt he had failed, as his most loyal followers mixed Flavor Aid with a lethal combination of cyanide and sedatives. Lane and Gary were taken to the guest house by armed guards and held there, while Jonestown fell apart around them. The residents were summoned to the pavilion, and Jones addressed the crowd in his final sermon. The time had come, he had told them, for all of them to make a sacrifice, what he called a revolutionary act. Someone was going to shoot the pilot on Ryan's plane, and they all had to act quickly because the Guyana Defense Force would be there in 45 minutes to torture, arrest, or kill any survivors. "We better not have any of our children left when it's over," he warned. As armed guards circled the building, the followers were given a choice: death by poison or death by bullet. The first person to volunteer to take the poison was a young mother. She had a small baby with her, about 1.5 years old. She gave the poison to the baby first and then took her own dose. She walked over to a field, sat down, and waited for death. 6 p.m. The pilots aboard the Cessna landed in Georgetown and told Prime Minister Burnham what had happened. As word of the shooting at the airport and its death toll spread, the death toll was rising at Jonestown. Not everyone took the poison willingly. A girl spat it out over and over again as the nurses forced her to take it. Others were injected with it via syringes when they refused to drink, some so aggressively that the needles were bent into their arms. All the while, men armed with guns and crossbows walked around the edge of the pavilion. One woman, Christine Miller, spoke up to argue with Jones. She pleaded with him. The babies deserved to live, and everyone had the right to choose their destiny. But the crowd sided with Jones, drowning out Miller's protests with angry shouts. Many of them took the poison willingly. Families poisoned their children first, then took their own doses before they all lay down on the ground, face down, and covered with blankets as if they were sleeping. Meanwhile, Mark Lane convinced the guards to let him and Gary go, insisting that they would document this historical moment. They would tell the world about Jonestown. As they sprinted into the jungle, they heard snippets of Jim urging people to drink and to die peacefully. Before Jonestown shut off its radio communications for the last time, a broadcast was made announcing the decision to die. But there were still loose ends to tie up. The Jonestown basketball team was in Georgetown, and someone at the compound made a call to the Temple's headquarters in the city. They were to take revenge on the Temple's enemies and then end their own lives. 7:30 p.m. As police swarmed the headquarters in Georgetown, there she used a razor to end her and her own children's lives. Bikeman was arrested on the scene. Back at the compound, Jim Jones lay peacefully on a pillow, a gunshot wound above his left temple. The remaining members gathered in Jim's cabin to take their doses of poison. Someone drank from a thermos, another from a pan. Some were injected, and some chose both injection and ingestion for a double death. They all lay down and went to sleep, with the exception of Annie Moore, who used a gun. November 19th, 8 a.m. The bodies were piled up at Jonestown, but there should have been 2 more victims. 76-year-old Hyacinth Thrash awoke in her dormitory and walked out into the compound. As she approached the pavilion, she saw the dead, including her sister. Later that day, Thrash would find 79-year-old Grover Davis. Davis was hard of hearing and missed the initial announcement to assemble in the pavilion. He hid in a ditch as the carnage unfolded. Over 900 people were dead, but Thrash and Davis had survived the Jonestown Massacre. Now go check out how Charles Manson came to lead one of the world's most dangerous cults, or this video instead.